Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and a tabletop role-playing aficionado. In this D&D review, I'm going to take a look at the adventure Legacy of Vecna, available now on the DM's Guild. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and the lead designer is also a patron. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy these reviews and enjoy watching fun weekly live plays and other D&D content, you can consider supporting me via patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Legacy of Vecna is volume 4 of the Doomed Forgotten Realms series, which is a really intriguing series of adventures that I've had the pleasure of reviewing every single one of them. That's this dystopian, like epically dystopian, apocalyptic version of the Forgotten Realms setting, where like every official 5th edition campaign has happened and has failed, or depending on where you're looking from the hero point of view, they failed, and they were also all in service of Vecna, who was actually the biggest of the big bads, who was manipulating everything, and the Soulmonger was for Vecna, and all the different discords and things that were happening were all in service of Vecna. And then the players eventually rise to the ranks to defeat Vecna through getting to level 20 by the end of the Fall of Vecna series. So this is a follow-up to that series, which, because the players reached level 20 at the end of Fall of Vecna, means it is an epic level campaign where the party actually starts at level 20 and can advance beyond that. Only if you, of course, own some kind of epic level book, because that actually isn't supported in the official 5e rules. And unfortunately, I don't believe it's actually supported here as well. Going through everything, I couldn't find any of that information. So I think if you actually want to run it as an epic campaign, you would need to purchase the Epic Character Handbook. What is it called? Epic Characters. It's by the same publisher, Quill and Cauldron, which I've also reviewed and is very, very good. I'm not someone that necessarily enjoys high-level D&D play, and in fact, the designers even say, like, yeah, high-level D&D play is pretty tricky. There's comments on balance here. But there's also options for running it as a Tier 4 campaign if you don't want to run it as a beyond level 20 thing. It's at the very end of the book. There's an appendix that allows you to run it starting at level 16 and then ending up at level 20 by the end. Now, you might be thinking, well, I'm not running the Vecna series, so I don't really care about, this isn't really going to affect me, but I just like watching your reviews, so that's why I'm here, which, fine. But I will say, this one in particular can be run separately more effectively than actually the other ones can, especially Fall of Vecna. Fall of Vecna really needs you to run Rise of Vecna first, I believe. But Legacy of Vecna, cleverly, you can run it as a follow-up to the Dune Forgotten Realms series, so you've run all those books and now you want to keep going. Or you could also run it as a follow-up to Vecna Eve of Ruin, which was the official 5e release that released at some point between Volume 3 and Volume 4, basically, of this series. And this series even stars Mordenkainen as the big bad, so it can kind of do this interesting connection to the fact that I'm going to spoil Vecna Eve of Ruin, but I hope only DMs are watching this anyway. But the twist in that series is that Mordenkainen is actually Kaz, I think, from the vampire buddy of Vecna in disguise. So this allows you to kind of follow up on like what happened to Mordenkainen and where's he at and what's he doing. Or you could simply run it as its own separate adventure, and it also makes sense for that because you don't necessarily need all the big Vecna stuff. You can just say, hey, this is just an adventure that's happening. You can even mention the fact that, hey, Vecna was defeated, or maybe not. This is just like, hey, we've discovered this thing that's happening. In other words, the ties to the Vecna thing are just enough to make it seem like it is a follow-up to the Dune Forgotten Realms series, but also cleverly designed where it doesn't have to be at all. So that was something I was actually very impressed with going into it, was that this is such a, I don't want to necessarily use modular, but it can be the most separated from all the other ones of the series, which is a big strength. So in other words, if you watch this review and you just like this adventure, you can absolutely just run it. Because, again, there's still not a whole lot of high-level campaigns out there, right? And this one is, like, very, very high level. So the main plot, if I can quickly summarize it, is it stars a Garon, I don't know how to actually pronounce, Archmage and current Open Lord of Waterdeep, which if you're running Eve of Ruin, you can replace with one of the wizard characters who are basically the same role, where it's like your primary relied on quest giver who has all the information and keeps sending you on the quest, which that's a fine plot structure. It's a little bummer to see it used so obviously again here, where the players are just constantly getting all the information from their one quest giver and then sent out on missions, but fine. So through Agaron, you learn that there's all these obelisks, which is a fun nod to all the different obelisks in the official 5e stuff. And with Vecna's destruction, all those obelisks have been feeding into a master obelisk that is full of all this really dangerous power, and the party is sent to go recover this obelisk, which is in Chapter 1. It happens to be that this obelisk is in the Mind Flayer city of Chittle in the Underdark. So the players are either level 20 or level 16 if you want to scale it down. Again, it's designed for level 20. The entire campaign is designed for like 20 to 25, I believe. But then there are, again, optional rules where you can lower things down to make it a purely tier 4 campaign, which I imagine most people would probably want to do. I think DMs are already like, gosh, high level play is crazy enough. I don't need to do like all these extra level 20 plus rules, but the information is there. You will have to get some other supplement in order to actually support that, though. So you make your way through the Underdark. There's some cool little situations and things. You can meet with like Vanifer from the Cult of Elemental Evil. There's a bunch of devils you can work with, and there's a really cool like negotiation. I don't know, like almost a combat encounter, but only with negotiating on a contract. So you can actually like purchase an Ice Devil usage, but of course they're trying to increase clauses, and it's just I thought it was really funny the way you could have a devil encounter, but have it just be purely like RP, which seems very appropriate. They make it sound like you're going to go into this Mind Flayer city, but actually it's just a few Underdark situations, which I enjoyed, and then you go into a cathedral that is basically like a huge death trap. Again, level 20, we're very high level. We've got Iron Golem like traps and body swapping things we can do. I really actually enjoyed this area quite a bit. There's a part where you can very creepily, you can see this like twisting area here, where you get closer to the far realm, and if you make it to the end, of course bad things are happening to you the whole time. You're like mutating and taking damage. Then you get these like magic items that act as like symbiotes from the Spider-Man series, where they're like graft onto you, and it sounds really creepy from the description, but they're actually just like cool magic. Like this thing wraps around your body, but then it's like a robe of stars or something. So if the players don't freak out about it, they get these cool magic items. That was actually a really clever idea. And at the end, you fight motherfucking Orcus. You fight the demon lord, Prince of the Undead, Orcus. He doesn't have his wand with him because if you remember in I think Fall of Vecna, the Demogorgons stole Orcus's wand because the demons are all were out of the abyss succeeded for the enemies, so they waged war with each other. But Orcus, of course, is still a very formidable stat block, and the party has to be able to fight him. And then during the fight, a pair of high-level mages come into play, cast Time Stop, do a bunch of basically DM shenanigans, and actually steal the obelisk and disappear. So the party they stop the ritual of what Orcus is trying to do with the obelisk, but now they're like, well, what the fuck was these other people? So they go back to Agarion, and he can identify these two wizards as being like, well, they're henchies of Mordenkainen, so we need to go check up on Mordenkainen. So that's where Chapter 2 leads us now. So again, I'm liking the plot so far. It's pretty good. We start out with a pretty basic, very straightforward, and then I'm like, okay, well, now it's leading to another thing. That's good. We go to Mordenkainen's tower for Chapter 2, to find this stolen obelisk, or just to see what's going on. And we're given this unique item called a chronofog, which is, if you've played, like, I don't know, any video game with like an immersive storytelling or something that has a way of doing like audio journals or holograms where they're, recreating the scenes or stuff, which I really like that. And I always try to find an excuse to recreate this somehow in my D&D campaigns as well, as a way of telling a story without literally having an NPC come on and be like, here's what happened. So in other words, they kind of sit back and watch like a scene or something. And you do this via this item that you get from Agarion that lets you open it up in every room and see what happened. That's a really clever idea, and also gives even further agency to the players, because it's there, instead of just triggering it, when they walk into the room, they have an item that allows them to trigger it. So maybe there's a room where they don't care about it and they move on, but maybe somebody's really excited, like, ooh, I'm going to use my thing here, and that's going to show us, paint this scene of what's going on. You basically see like Mordenkainen's learning about this mysterious force called a serpent, and how it can battle back against the Vecna and everything. And it sounds like it was like the road to hell is paved with good intentions, or something, where, you know, he started off wanting to fight back against Vecna, but eventually gets kind of corrupted by this serpent creature and is essentially now our big bad. So you kind of learn that through the course of this chapter. You have to eventually, I think you get teleported. If you steal anything, you get teleported to like the basement, and you meet with like an illusory Strahd who can, you know, screw with the party. You meet the friendly gnome who can tell you the passwords, the warden, or whatever is the sole servant of the great archmage Mordenkainen. So you get to go through the whole tower. Very fun, you know, tower with a bunch of animated, you know, stuff, classic Wizards Tower stuff. And then you get to the journal at the end and learn that Mordenkainen is going to be involved in his own ritual, similar to basically what Vecna was doing, if the ritual allows you to remake the universe. And you're like, well, shit, now we got to go stop Mordenkainen. Mordenkainen, and the very end of it is he appears, he detects somebody's fucked with his journal, and the whole tower ends up collapsing, and you have like 10 rounds to make it out, and this insane stuff happens over the course of several rounds as this tower like collapses into the abyss, and like it's very high level, like you're just hurtling through areas, there's demons spawning up, and it's just absolutely insane. That's like the climax boss fight. Chapter 3 then sets the stage for what is basically the rest of the campaign, which primarily actually takes place in Sigil and the Outlands area. So if you like the Planescape setting, but maybe you were disappointed in the official 5e Planescape release, which was called Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse, which I was, you know, I'll raise my hand, I was disappointed in that release because I thought it had just... well, I won't go into it. You can go watch that review. This allows you to explore Sigil a little, which I hate that pronunciation, but that's the official one, a little better, I think. And I think Sigil is an awesome location. And in fact, the entire chapter 3, I believe, is not even really a main quest. So we learn, like, okay, Mordenkainen is a problem. We need to find him. And like finding Mordenkainen becomes the main quest for the next like 3 chapters. But the problem is there's really no main quest in chapter 3. Chapter 3 does a very odd thing where it's like, hey, you arrive in Sigil, God, I'm messing it up. And it's a shock because like a year has gone by, right? Because of all the timey-wimey stuff that happened in the tower of Mordenkainen's tower, you appear and it's like, oh no, the rituals like progress so far, and kind of gives an excuse for like shit falling apart all of a sudden. And literally the multiverse is collapsing. In fact, there's a cool image. Yeah, this picture right here. Where you can see that like entire realms, I guess, of the multiverse have like disappeared and been destroyed, and other ones are like collapsing. So when you get to Sigil, it's like a refugee crisis happening. Basically, all these, like, it's just pandemonium, not literally pandemonium. Pandemonium's right there. That's a joke for you. That has all these creatures appearing and portals appearing everywhere, and Sigil's in major trouble as you're in the middle of this apocalyptic situation. So we're no longer in the Forgotten Realms, and we don't ever return to the Forgotten Realms, which kind of makes sense because at this level of play, we are doing extraplanar shit, which totally makes sense to me. I will say that chapter 3 is the weakest chapter, though, and I would even argue that it shouldn't have been its own chapter because it's just like random events, not necessarily, it's scripted events in Sigil. The party is like told to like go find a home, and then a bunch of events happen to them. And the main quest literally is, in fact, you can see it on this page right here. After a week has passed, Agaron summons the characters back to his Sigil sanctum and proceed to chapter 4 for more details. So there's no main quest chapter 3. It's just time passes. So I think there was a huge misstep here, like a rare stumble for the series, that should have been some kind of steps to an investigation to finding what they needed to do next. And instead, I think the designers make a mistake here and just have, again, your all-knowing quest giver suddenly figure everything out themselves and give that information to the party, and the party set up on their... Now, I don't necessarily complain about linear adventures. Lord knows most of my adventures are very linear in that way, and my particular group appreciates that. They want to just be told, like, where do we need to go next and what do we need to do? But I think you can still create a series of breadcrumbs or let them do an investigation. And here they really don't. We just kind of get... And I mean, I like chapter 3 in terms of the events here. Like I said, I think Sigil's a really fun city with a lot of, extra cool stuff happening. And especially, it's not even a normal day at Sigil. It's like, it's chaos. There's portals appearing everywhere. There's literally like entire armies and monsters appearing and crazy shit's happening. At one point, the Lady of Pain even gets to speak to the party. Although I don't think that's later until right before they do the finale. So it's a bunch of encounters, but there's no main quest here, which I think is ultimately very weak. Instead, chapter 4 is basically like, okay, we continue with the main quest. There is a bit, I guess, where, yeah, right here with the tension levels, where the things the party does or doesn't do or fails to do raises or lowers the tension, and that raises or lowers this tension DC, which is used later on in the final chapter whenever the party is dealing with other things around the planescape and how that affects what they're doing. So that part's interesting at least, but I think this chapter should have either been combined with chapter 4 or give me some more investigation checks, because otherwise what happens is the Archmage, yeah, this is my mathematical calculations indicate we have between 1 and 3 months before his ritual is complete. And there's a divine relic known as the Eye of Corellon. Legend has it this relic can be used to scry the location of anything within the multiverse. So it's like the party just waits until their quest giver gets all the information and gives it to them. I think that's the mistake. I think your party should have been given like, hey, I've heard of this thing. You need to go contact this person over here. I think they might know more. And they go there, and then crazy shit happens. But then they learn more to go over this other area, and then crazy shit happens to them, and they finally learn. And to where by the end of it, they're like, okay, we know we need to get the Eye of Corellon, and we know that it's here, and we know that it's being attacked by this force. And then you can either go back to a Garen and tell him, or just go on and do your thing. So that's how I would probably fix that little bit there. But chapter 4, where the Eye of Corellon is, it is currently in the hands of Grumpsh, literally the god of orcs, who is waging a war from Acheron, which is one of the planes, which is also was the Ultimate's guide, Oron's Guide to the Planes, which I also believe I reviewed that product, is waging war against the elves in Arborea. So the party has to go to the Arborea Outlands and goes through this like crazy, grim, dark, bloody war between the orcs and the elves. They meet this friendly NPC elf who ends up being Corellon in disguise, which is really fun because you get some god-on-god awesomeness. But it reminds me of I think Dragonlance did this a couple times, right? Because I think the gods would constantly Dragonlance is very like Greek mythology that way, where the gods are constantly like turning themselves into people and just fucking with like people and events and things. So it reminded me of that in a good way, where it's like you've got literally the god themselves disguised and they're just an accompanying NPC, but then during big battles they like, you know, cast daylight or do all these cool things. So I thought that was a really neat twist for this chapter. And eventually, once you finally make your way through these Arborean Outlands, which is a hex crawl kind of, but it's broken up by like mini dungeons. Also, it's not just purely like, oh, it's a hex crawl with a random encounter table. In fact, I don't think there are any random encounters, right? I'm looking through this, like, we're level 20-ish. We're not doing random encounters now. Instead, we're doing like a couple scripted encounters, which is my preferred way. And then we have actual like dungeon crawls. And at the end of each dungeon crawl, you got like a god imprisoned, who are basically all the ones who disagree with what Grumpsh is doing. You can free those dubious characters, and they could potentially help you against this final battle against Grumpsh. So the more things you do, the more that can advantage the party. So I also like that little twist. You can see all these extra dungeon crawls here. By the way, if you haven't noticed already, full color maps. We don't have as many here as in fact, this whole book is shorter. I'm recording this before the product is actually for sale, so I'm not sure what the price is going to be, if it's going to be cheaper than the others or about the same. But there seems to be fewer content than the previous Vecna books, at least in terms of how many like pure battle maps and chapters and things you get. But I still appreciate all these maps with full color arts. I love having that for like every single, not necessarily like a just battle maps, but having dungeons, all of those done out in full color is super appreciated. And we get gridless maps and gridded maps and DM maps as well. So once you make your way through all of these areas, you finally get to his floating war cube, which is guarded by like an ancient blue dragon, and you have to infiltrate the place. At the end, you can actually, despite having Corellon with you and facing off against Grumpsh, it says you can actually have somebody try to solve it diplomatically, epic level diplomacy, which I respect. That would be like the one fight where I would like, this fight's got to happen, right? But if somebody wants to step forward and be like, look, I can convince the gods not to fight each other, I would let it happen personally, because I think that could be an amazing moment for sure. And it doesn't happen very often where a party member can legit kind of talk themselves out of a major boss fight. So I did appreciate that. And then at the end of that, you can retrieve the Eye of Corellon, and now you've got what you need to find Mordenkainen. But wait, we have one more chapter before the finale, which is Vecna Strikes Back. So in this case, While you were gone. This is a trope that so many adventures use, and I don't mind it at all because it's very effective, and I love it. Which is, oh no, our quest giver got kidnapped or killed, or in the case of Fall of Vecna, I believe at one point the quest giver is the Xanathar, and the Xanathar is transformed into a death tyrant. So oh no, our quest giver is now an enemy. But basically, I love that cliche. Maybe I don't know. It's starting to be a cliche for me. Whereas like your dependable, regular NPC. It's the Professor X problem, right? In all the old cartoons or even the new one, like Professor X gets fridged, and like, oh no, it's up to us to pick up the pieces. Like, even though he's the font of information, all knowing. So in this case, the Vecna cultists, which, hey, we thought we got rid of them all, but it turns out there's, of course, some remaining. They kidnap Agaron, and the party, there's not really a big investigation here. It's kind of a couple paragraphs. I think the designers are like, look, the party's so high level, like, they're just going to cast whatever bullshit spell and get them to investigate, which I could see that too, but maybe there should have been a little bit more in the investigation part of it. It also says that the assassins can try to steal the Eye of Krellin, and I appreciate that the story says most likely they're just gonna kidnap Agaron and not be able to steal the Eye of Krellin, because I agree, because assuming they get the Eye of Krellin, they're gonna attune to that immediately, and then like, how are they gonna steal it at that point? Like, it's very, very hard to steal, even from low level PCs. It's hard to steal from them, let alone these godlike, again, level 20 plus. But so I appreciate that the story is like, look, they're probably gonna end up kidnapping Agaron, which again they left back at his home, so they want to retrieve him in order to properly maybe, and I guess it could be technically optional. But I think you're supposed to use. I think Agaron can like teach you how to use the Eye of Krellin, or there was some little bit in there where it's like, nah, you should probably rescue him. And the Vecna cultists are using this like front of a business, which is this Chaos Forge armory run by Slod, which literally have like a very funny office where they're all like transformed into gnomes or something, trying to help people at their office front. But it's all a cool, interesting, exotic location in Sigil, which I appreciate. And they have to battle a bunch of Slods, which are always good, like. Kind of a higher, like I guess a mid-level minion, but used in, you're taking like a creature that could be used as a boss for lower level creatures, but turning them into like a minion, where you have multiple stat blocks of that creature. I think it's pretty effective for higher levels to deal with. And then you get to the hidden information, the hidden areas, which eventually leads to a lich named Osterneth, who is a Vecna loyalist, and she, interestingly enough, could be a potential ally to the party. More than likely, they're going to figure out that she's a lich and she's working for Vecna. And again, I appreciate that the designers were like, they don't require her to like go along with the party, which is always the most challenging thing when you have one of those things. It's like, oh, I need this to happen for the campaign to work. Like, you just have to have contingencies in. And I think this is a good job where it's like, hey, if the party can work with her or they want to keep her around because she works for Vecna, which means she doesn't want Mordenkainen to succeed. So it's kind of the enemy of my enemy kind of thing. So that's, I mean, they could just kill her and that's fine. Or you can drag her along and she does kind of help the party. But then, of course, at the end, she tries to turn against them at one point and the party has to battle her eventually. So I appreciate that the designers are like, they throw these things in there. And it's just like, hey, if it ends up being a cool thing for the party to deal with on a role-playing story thing, then fine. If it's just a boss fight, then that's also fine. And I appreciate that. So thumbs up to using Osterneth the Bronze Lich. So you rescue Agaron. And now that you've got Agaron in place, you can use the Eye of Krellin. The Eye of Krellin finds Mordenkainen, who is in a large walking castle in the middle of the Abyssal Outlands. And and this is chapter 6, the final chapter. And to reach him, you can take this train, I guess. He basically has a ticket to this infernal train that you can take, which is, again, there's so many ways. Travel is just not really a thing at this high level, right? You're not running random encounters, whatever. You're so high level. You're teleporting around, whatever. So I appreciate the designers know that. But in this case, it's like, hey, what if we made travel cool again? And again, took advantage of this unique situation. So in this case, we're going to ride this hell train through the Abyssal Outlands. And near the end, it's going to get attacked by a legion of angels. Awkward. Well, I'm just here bumming a ride. I'm not really, I'm not like part of the regular clientele or anything. But they don't care. They're trying to destroy the damn thing. So that's a pretty funny situation where the party's on this train having to fight back against these angels. If the angels succeed, then the party has to have another couple encounters as they have to walk their way like a week's worth of journey to get to this walking castle. which the Walking Castle, they have to fight their way through the mages and then get their way into the castle. And then the final ritual is not really a... I was a little disappointed we don't get like a big kind of final dungeon crawl here, but we had enough. We had a lot of dungeon crawls also. Instead, the final area is... You walk in and there's a bunch of portals open to various other of those realms, the dimensions, whatever. And they are like blinking red and they're under attack because Mordenkainen is in the middle of the ritual. So the best way to face Mordenkainen, because he's invulnerable while he's doing the ritual, is to prevent him from destroying these other realms which are currently under attack. So specifically, there's 3 of them: Mechanus, Pandemonium, and Elysium, I believe, are the 3. Or no, not Elysium. Is it? It's Arborean, I guess. Okay, it's Mount Olympus though is the location. So the party gets to portal into these areas, and each one is under some kind of calamity. Like Pandemonium, they just make it from one side to the other, but like the Pandemonium winds are constantly hitting them, and it's literally their goal just to make it from left to right, like an old side-scrolling video game. In Mount Olympus, the gods are being attacked by these like uber titans. These like just incredibly powerful creatures the party has to fight. It's just kind of a big boss fight. Once they complete all 3 of these situations, then they basically unlock the final boss, which is cool because I think you do get that climactic like, shit, we're saving all the planes and we're popping around in different planar situations. And then of course you fight the final standoff against Mordenkainen, who has been corrupted by this serpent thing, which is apparently the same thing that the Lady of Pain is, who runs Sigil, like these elder beings, and the serpent is like this manifestation of magic. I'm not quite a fan of like, oh, this is like, oh, the serpent was actually behind powering Vecna. Like, it's like, come on, just let Vecna be the big bad of that one. We don't need a whole nother big bad. And I almost feel like it would have been more interesting if we had just not done this serpent thing and just had it been like Mordenkainen, in his pursuit of destroying Vecna, maybe became just legit corrupted by power. Maybe even a little bit of Vecna got into him or something. So the serpent thing I wasn't too on board with. Basically, I just thought it was, I don't know, it didn't really work for me so much as making it more personal and making it more like this was Mordenkainen's doing. Especially because at the end, when you defeat Mordenkainen, he drops like a bottle and you open the bottle and it's like a Mordenkainen from 20 years ago appears. So you get to like still save him in a way, sort of. Although you destroy the version that was corrupted. So I think the pieces are there for a more socially RP, intertwined with the actual final climax versus just, oh, they were possessed by this eldritch being who's making them do all this stuff. There's a bunch of like portals the party has to deal with, and of course there's constant like the boss fight's absolutely insane with all these things happening. And imagine at this level, things get really, really crazy. But a little bit of story stuff aside, I thought it was a very appropriate and epic climactic conclusion to this storyline. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the Legacy of Vecna. Pro, this is an awesome, epic campaign, primarily set in Sigil and the Outlands, which I think is a huge plus because we haven't really explored this location very much. I think it's very appropriate for a tier 4 or tier 5, I guess, campaign to take place, primarily surrounding and concerning the multiverse. So I really like this setting, and I'm glad that we're using it to its fullest. Pro, optional advice and rules for running the campaign as tier 4 instead of epic levels, as well as following up to Eve of Ruin or Fall of Vecna, or as a separate story. Where is that even mentioned here? Here we go. So this whole area, I think it's just, it's really clever the way it does this with, acknowledging like Mordenkainen's twist that happens in Fall of Vecna, or replacing one of the Agaron with, I forget the name of the character from the Eve of Ruin campaign, or just doing it all separately and just saying like, hey, it doesn't even really matter. You can just mention the fact that these events happened or didn't happen, but this is all just a separate storyline. So I think that's a huge pro. And then also the rules, I believe, are at the very end here. Yeah. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Recommended you replace Agaron with Lady Illustrial Silverhand. That's what I can remember. Because of her pre-existing connections to Waterdeep. In this case, she's been trying to discern the whereabouts of Mordenkainen and discover the Archmage has been collecting obelisks for some mysterious purpose and sends the characters to Chittle to investigate. So just literally like following up on what is going on with Mordenkainen from Eve of Ruin. So which is great, makes sense. Yeah, in this case, all of the chapters are given an overview about how to reduce the DC or lessen the amount of creatures in certain areas or whatever. They're all kind of just contained here rather than having it be in the chapters themselves, and mentions the fact that I think this can get you from 16. In this case, the character will reach level 20 by the beginning of level 6. So the problem is if you're coming off of Eve of Ruin or the Doomed Forgotten Realms, in both those cases, you're going to be 20 by the time you run this. So probably the only time you would actually use this for a tier 4 campaign is if you were running this completely separately, which is interesting because I would really like to run this. If I were to run this, I don't know if I would ever run Doomed Forgotten Realms, but for an Eve of Ruin follow-up, I think it works really well, especially if I play up the Mordenkainen thing, being corrupted and having that be an interesting character to follow up on. Then I'm like, well, shit, now we're going to be level 20 after Eve of Ruin. So it does get tricky because I don't necessarily want to be a one to run 20 plus campaign either. Pro over 40 stat blocks, including CR 30 plus gods. So if you ever wanted to see stat blocks of Grumsh, of Magbliut, the goblin one. Mordenkainen even is a CR 25. I'm trying to find where they have. There we go. Shargos is 37. Oh, Vecna's in here for 38. I don't remember fighting Vecna in this campaign. It was just here. Maybe there's a part where you have to deal with Vecna. All the Orc Goddess of Healing, like all the Orcs, especially you fight all the Orc gods, they're all like level 30 or 40 or something. In that one chapter 4, I believe, you end up dealing with a lot of them. Pro over a dozen full color maps, DM and player versions. They're just kind of interspersed through here. They are included as a separate, zip file where you can find them all. Also nice kind of regional overland maps as well. We got that nice one of Sigil and the Outlands, and then one of the Underdark, which is very cool. I like having these maps as well. Con, I think my only real con, I mentioned the fact that Mordenkainen and the Serpent thing, I didn't really like that so much, but I don't think it was a con. The main con is when I talked so much about chapter 3 and how I think there was a misstep in not having a main quest here and just literally pausing the main quest and saying, hey, just go do some random events around, Sigil, and then eventually we'll just continue the main quest and have the quest giver know everything and give you the information. I think was a misstep there. We could have put in some steps along the way and had the party uncover things and still obviously have a bunch of encounters and things around Sigil. And I love Sigil. I think it's a great location. I mentioned that in the Planescape book, that I thought Sigil is so cool, and it's a shame we get out of there as quickly as we do, because I think it's just an awesome, just cool, exotic urban environment to explore in. So I definitely don't want to lose like this chapter. I definitely want to stay in Sigil, but make it just so we can do some extra steps and feel like we're progressing in the main quest that the players are doing versus just literally passing time until the quest giver has all the information. Final thoughts. Legacy of Vecna succeeds as an epic follow-up to the excellent Doomed Forgotten Realms series, or the official 5e campaign Vecna Eve of Ruin, or even as a completely separate adventure for high-level play. Thank you to everyone for watching this D&D review. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and you can support my work at patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shouts to Platinum Patrons: Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, Brandon, Genocider, Roleplay Roll, Christopher, Corey, Big Nut, John F, John L, Nathan, Andrew, Stephanie, Jason, Lumpy Spuds, Warden, Harold, Unimo LLC, Tom, They're Eating the Dogs, Marcus, Snuggie, Hugo, Shay, and Chris. And Gold Patrons: RPG Papercraft, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Dead Lizard Lounge, Jerome, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, Scott, Refus, Jerry, Glenn, and Mark. Thank you all very much for your support.